Thus, from the Ikon Institute of Australia, Rebekah is also in private practice with her business Adelaide Art Therapy and Integrative Health Solutions in Belair. Tell us more, Rebekah. What motivates you to practice as an art therapist?
Well, I think there are three things that really motivate me to practice art therapy, and one of the main ones is seeing the changes that people are able to make in their lives in the long term through using the art and the art materials. Recently I had a client just finish a few months worth of therapy with me, and she told me that without actually being able to see the art, she probably would still be in an emotional abusive relationship, domestic abuse situation, and that through being able to see the art outside of herself, outside of her thoughts, she was able to build up the courage to end that relationship. So another one that I can think of a little while ago was a client who had been using methamphetamines for over 20 years, and she told me at the end of her therapy that it was the art that helped her quit for an extended period of time. So when you hear feedback like that, I guess it's a real motivator. And I think the second thing is the meaning that this role as an art therapist has in my life. So as a child, I was always into art and language, and I was quite good at those things at school. So I always knew that I wanted to do that when I grew up for a job. So I went off to university and studied things like art history and languages, and later on I did 3D animation and graphic design. So after I gained those qualifications, I went off to the UK to chase my creative career, and while I did find my first graphic design job there, I also went through a major traumatic event that affected my life in quite a few ways. So over the next few years I went through quite a period of healing and recovery from that, but at the same time I was still doing my digital media work. And I think perhaps you can relate to this, I don't know, but many of us go through life being in a job where we feel like we don't really belong there, or it's not really quite right for us. And I did feel that quite often. I felt like there was sort of music jangling out of tune a little bit within me, and that got louder and louder as it went along. My dad always taught me when I was young that everything unfolds as it's meant to in the right time, and I really have faith in that, because somewhere along the way I discovered art therapy, and it was quite interesting because I'd never heard of it before, but then in the space of about, I'd say, a couple of days, I heard about it 3 or 4 times. So it really grabbed my attention in a way that I felt like I really couldn't ignore it. So once I started following that little path of info, all these light bulbs started popping, and I thought, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be an art therapist. And so I decided to go off to an info session, a little bit like the one we're going to be having on Saturday, actually. That was about 12 years ago I went to that, and after that I was really excited. I went home and I flooded my brain with books and videos and articles about art therapy. And then a little while after that, I studied the advanced diploma in transpersonal art therapy. And so in 2012, I started my private practice. And then a little bit later on, a couple of years later, I came back to Ikon to do the graduate diploma in art psychotherapy. And that was great. I really enjoyed that. The third most important thing that I think it motivates me is hope, and instilling a sense of hope in the clients that there is an alternative way for life, really, and the struggles that they might be going through. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for explaining how powerful art therapy is. And I know you have touched on your association with Ikon, but can you explain your connection with Ikon and what you do within Ikon itself?
Okay, so yeah, as I just mentioned, that whole journey of coming to art therapy is very much includes Ikon, and it's from Ikon that I've learned all my skills as an art therapist and continue to, really, through my teaching. So I did the advanced diploma back in 2010, then I came back and did the graduate diploma, and during that time I became a tutor here at Ikon. So I did that for a while I was still studying, and now that I'm finished, I've gone onto the academic team. So I'm in the creative arts faculty here at Ikon, and I'm a lecturer, as well as I give student support, and I work with the other academic team members all around the country to develop our curriculum.
Thank you. And tell me about the process of art therapy.
Okay, so I think I'll start this discussion with a bit of a quote from a very inspiring man by the name of Carl Gustav Jung, who many of you might have heard of. So he said that often the hands will solve a mystery that the intellect has struggled with in vain. And I really resonate with that quote because I see it so often in art therapy. And what he goes on to say about this is that often it's necessary to clarify a vague content, and to do this you can draw, paint and model. So how that relates in art therapy is that people come along and they might have something like general anxiety. So that's what he means by vague content. But if you can give that vague content shape and form through using art materials, then you're able to dialogue with it, you're able to see it and externalized outside from yourself, and be able to then investigate that a little bit more. So Carl Jung was all about privileging the unconscious, and so that's to match up the unconscious, what goes on in our unconscious thoughts and in our psyche and our conscious thoughts. So we do that with art therapy.
Fantastic. Whose work in the realm of art therapy has deeply influenced you, other than Carl Jung, obviously?
I've got a book here that I'd like to just share a little bit with you. So Erich Fromm, he was a great 20th century humanist philosopher and psychologist, and he's written lots of books, which I have many of. He's been a guiding light for me very much throughout my work as an art therapist, but he says in this book, which is The Forgotten Language, that symbolic language is a language in which inner experiences, feelings and thoughts are expressed as if they were sensory experiences, events in the outer world. It's a language which has a different logic from the conventional one we speak in the daytime. A logic in which not time and space are the ruling categories, but intensity and association. It's the one universal language that the human race has ever developed, the same for all the cultures and throughout history. And so it's symbolic language that we use very much in art therapy, and so his work has been quite influential for me. And also in that, I think I'm also interested in the investigation of our own personal mythologies. So Joseph Campbell, who wrote extensively on that, is another person that has influenced me quite a lot. To give you an example of how that works in with my practice, I do run workshops based on the hero's journey that was developed by Joseph Campbell at the Cancer Care Centre for people living with cancer, and that came about as a result of myself having a diagnosis of cancer actually 3 years ago to this day, and my approach to integrative healing was to conceptualize that journey over the stages of diagnosis, treatment, surgery, that kind of thing. So what happens is I get the clients to come in and create artwork on the stages of their journey, and then they from the artwork comes the symbols. So things will come up for them that they perhaps hadn't seen before, and they can then create their own mythology out of that, their own mythical tale about their experience with cancer. So then they do things like pulp the paper themselves from old letters and appointment cards from doctors, and perhaps petals of flowers from their garden, things that have meaning for them throughout that journey. So it's really, the whole book becomes an artifact of that experience, and then they come together on the last day and share that experience together. So another person will read the story to them, which has a lot of cathartic processes going on with that as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay.
What skills do you need to have to be an art therapist?
Okay. Well, listening. Listening's a really important one, and Eric Fromm talks about that as well. He talks about the fact that to truly listen to someone, you have to concentrate really hard. And often I'm teaching the students here that it's great to take notes, but it has to be minimal, because if you're not really listening to your client, like watching their face and picking up all those little nuances of communication, you won't get the whole story. So that's really important. Also, active imagination is really important. So you would have to perhaps be able to see in a picture that has a few lines and squiggles a helicopter with aliens in it dropping a ladder into a volcano mouth that's got seaweed spurting out of it. So it's, when a client says those things in therapy, you might not really be able to see it, but if you look really hard enough, you can meet them there in that space. Another thing you need to have is empathy. So empathy is a really important one, being able to put yourself in another person's shoes and really live their experience as if you were having that experience yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you have any advice for anyone interested in studying art therapy or becoming an art therapist?
Yeah, I really think that you need to ask yourself and be honest with yourself about why you want to do this work. For lots of people, they might come along and say, oh, well, I've always been really interested in art, but that's not going to be enough to sustain you in this career. You definitely need to be committed to becoming a psychotherapist above all things. The art part is a really nice part of the job, but you've got to remember that it's a tool for communication. It's not that you're coming to this job to gain a reward out of the artwork or anything like that. It's really, you've got to be committed to helping a person grow and develop through their own creative process.
Great. And how has being an art therapist helped you to grow?
I think in many, many different ways, especially through all the study that I've done, the reading that I perhaps wouldn't have done if I hadn't undertaken this course, especially in the realm of philosophy. That's something that I was quite surprised by, about how much I really gelled with that and how much I'm able to use that in my practice as well, the reading that I've done, to be able to help clients understand things on a deeper level. I also do quite a bit of clinical supervision, so that means me going to see a clinical supervisor for my own benefit through my practice. So I need to bounce ideas off them and talk about problems that might come up, and that through doing that I learn quite a bit about myself. The way I might respond to a client in a session says something about me. So being able to be self-aware is a really important skill that you need to have also with this, and I've learnt that through being an art therapist.
Great. And what's next for you, Rebekah, in your work?
Well, I'm hoping next year that I'm going to get more time to do more group programs, especially up at Integrative Health Solutions, where I work as an art therapist there. I really need to build my own practice more, just because I've been teaching a lot this year, and sometimes the balance gets out of whack. So I'm really trying to focus on that a little bit more. I am teaching here at Ikon. I'll be teaching in the Bachelors of Art Psychotherapy and Integrative Psychotherapy. And I'm also studying, I like to learn all the time, so I often do little courses, and at the moment I'm doing one with Russ Harris, who is presenting a course on acceptance and commitment therapy for trauma. So that's keeping me busy, and because I'm also a civil celebrant, there's quite a few things that I'm doing, but it's really interesting, and I'm excited about what's coming.
And what do you believe the future holds for art therapy?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it, because I think Art therapy's been much maligned in history, with people having this perception that it's quite an alternative and a hippie form of therapy for people, and it's not. It's really not that. And working now with a team of medical professionals, alongside doctors and psychologists and other allied health professionals in this integrative health practice, I'm really happy that it's finally starting to gain credibility, and I'm committed 100% to helping change that perception and continuing to grow it so that people will understand that art therapy really is a credible form of therapy for human beings, especially for ones who can't articulate themselves very well and need another form of communication to be able to work out their issues. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today, Rebekah, and thanks for joining us, everyone. And join us next week when we have Simon Paul joining us, who is the head of faculty in counselling and psychotherapy. Thank you.